What's going on, everybody? Today is September 6th, and today, or you're listening to the Daily AI Show live. I almost got ahead of myself there. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're talking about AI readiness for your business. So if you're listening to us or watching this show, even on live or replay, and you're thinking, how do I know? How do I know if I'm ready, if my business is ready? Enterprise, mid-level, startups, how do I know that I'm ready to implement some new AI strategies? This is the show for you. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about what is AI readiness. We're going to talk about, some technical and different business components, how data plays a huge role into all of this, and how it's very, very similar to, business intelligence, which I used to, work in more. So with that, I'll just sort of open it up as we always do. Does anybody got some, initial takes they want to jump in on this, or anywhere to kick this off?
Well, I just want to reiterate what you said in a previous show, Brian. Clean up your data.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it, right? And I keep going back to that. So I think maybe that's a great place to start, Jimmy, is, I spent 2.5 years working for a data analysis company, and who would have known at the time, business intelligence or BI, they called it all different things. But who would have known at the time that set me up perfectly to work in AI and AI ops? Because man, is there, and we've talked already about AI literacy, how similar that is to things like data literacy, how similar a lot of these same ideas, then the big word was, data is the new oil, right? You would hear that everybody used that term, and now we'll say, oh, AI is the new oil. But it still has to be built off of something, right, Jimmy? And so that's sort of the idea that I keep going back to, is like, you could have the best AI solution in the world handed to you, and they could say, don't tell anybody, Andy, this is the best AI solution for FitAid, we built it for you. Okay. And you'd be like, fantastic. I want to deploy this. And then you'd say, okay. And you'd go to your internal team. You'd say, let's deploy this AI solution. It is going to crush the competition once we're able to do this and that automation or whatever. And then maybe a day or two later, somebody comes back to you, Andy, and says, oh, here's the thing. Our data sucks. And so we can't rely on it. We haven't been able to rely on it. All those data analysis, executive dashboards that we built for you, Andy, we were kind of just winging it and hoping you didn't call us out on it in the meeting. And we really couldn't have answered another question after it if you had asked us. And so that's what we currently have. And I promise you, as crazy as that sounds, that is a very, very real situation and reality for thousands of businesses.
I've never, that's astounding to me that you could play act that situation inside a company, because it would become immediately apparent to anyone who was using a real business intelligence interface and doing visualizations. You could, a person who understands their business can immediately see into errors in the data, right? Especially when they're graphically presented. That's just not right. Something's wrong with this. And that's happened even with really good data. Like, the data's real, but there's something about the way the BI system has been articulated that is not presenting the information correctly. And that gets recognized immediately by savvy executives in a company. So I don't know that that's a big problem, with BI. Now, it might be a big problem with AI, because there's all kinds of ways that AI is auto-magically generating things that are very difficult to test or explain. So, I can see it being a bigger problem with AI.
Auto-magically. That's an awesome term. Did you just come up with that? That's
no,
awesome. Auto-magically is a thing? Okay.
Those of us of a certain generation, Brian, have used that term often.
What is that? What did you say?
Those of us of a certain generation have used that term often.
Listen, that's the first for me. See, this is why, Andy, this is why we love this show, because we all learn something new. What I was going to say that real quick, Andy, and then we can move on from maybe the data point of it, is the only thing I would say is like the famous quote that says, torture data enough and it'll confess to anything. And I think there's a very real problem.
Wait. Re-say that again.
Torture the data enough and it will confess to anything. It's a very famous
that's a phrase I've never heard before. That's brilliant.
That's
That's
an
right.
amazing
Yeah,
quote.
pretty good.
And we used to
Okay.
refer to it a lot because that would happen quite a bit, is that you put high pressure on data analysts, right, at companies. They could be code engineers and things like that, and they're writing code and they're building these different dashboards, and they have to be done. And oftentimes what would happen is they would get into these meetings, and I only know because we were on the side trying to help people as consultants, and just like AI, the data looked very real, very convincing. Perhaps the scale wasn't just right. Perhaps instead of making that y-axis 1 to 1,000, we made it 1 to 100. We're like, look at our growth, and so it could happen. It could happen because people are people pleasers and they don't want to get fired. And so they think, oh, well, all I have to do is really just make sure this data shows the rosy situation that it is, only to come to find out that oftentimes, I'll say sometimes, maybe not oftentimes, maybe you're right, Andy, that data is not as reliable as one would hope internally. And my take on this quick is just that you can't build anything on AI on the top of that if that's your internal problem.
Yeah. So for most companies, though, it's not going to be so much a question of whether the data is reliable or accurate, but which data can be put into a form that can be delivered into the newest model of search and retrieval. And that is chatbot, right? So a conversational chatbot that uses the power of large language models to really do much more, complete explanation of what the underlying data is telling you, including all the way up to code interpreter, where you can load data in and say, tell me something about this data. And it's going to do what a business intelligence system would have to have been programmed and then graphically, massaged to present. It's going to tell you what the conclusions are. And that's a really powerful use case. But in order to do that, you've got to start thinking about what do I want these, conversational LLMs to do with my data? And one of the two big areas that I would propose are look at all of your internal operational documentation, get it in a form that can be, added to the context database that will then make it accessible to anybody in the company. And now you have a conversational chatbot that can answer questions but to any employee. And we've talked earlier in different shows about the onboarding process with new employees and how they can access that rich history of data that can be accumulated. So there's a good preparatory step there for people who want to just get ready to use a conversational chatbot internally. That's one example.
I love it.
So this is a conversation that happens in the Salesforce community because there's a description field when you create a field, right? And the description field can just be my initials and the date I created it. Or it can be a very robust, like this field came to be because of these reasons. And I still my initials and the date I created it, that kind of stuff. It has not been super important, but that is part of the conversation. That's part of the data that is going to be searched and conversed with. And that's one of the things that's coming up in the Salesforce community about clean up your data. Like, what do your field description fields say?
Yes.
Yeah, tagging with
actually, it's funny you
metadata
say
is
that,
a
Beth.
key step.
Sorry?
It's funny you say
Ooh, you just went out,
now.
Aaron.
Anyway, I was going to say, Beth, you're talking about
It's not
tagging
me,
with
you guys.
metadata, and that can be now longer form than just a single classification tag, for example. It can
Right.
be a full description, and that becomes part of the explanation of what this underlying data is talking about.
Yep. And
Yeah,
those are just
sorry, I was
more
gonna
data
say-
points for the conversation, for the natural language processing to happen.
Yeah.
Aaron.
Go
I
ahead,
was
go ahead,
gonna-
Aaron.
I was going
We
to
can hear
say
you now.
that when you started, something went wrong with my speakers. I don't know if it was what it was, but anyway, I was just going to say, just as you started speaking, my first thought was I haven't really used BI system or anything advanced because I've mostly worked for really small firms, but CRMs, that's the area I've always seen horrible data from company people spelling things wrong, not naming fields correctly, not putting the right information in. I mean, it used to drive me mental trying to access it when somebody else was being slack about it. So even if you're a small company with just a simple CRM, you probably have a bit of work to do just to clean that up before you can start getting fancy with some of the AI stuff out there.
Yeah, we were just talking about this in the AI exchange yesterday with Sarah's last name.
Davidson.
Yes. And we were having a great conversation about, the sort of data governance, what you were just saying, Beth, and you and Aaron, about like naming conventions and things like that. And I said, yeah, I almost, and maybe this already sort of exists out there, but I almost see it like a tool like a Seismic, which is what it's called, learning management system, LMS. But part of that, I went in and got certified with it. And a lot of it is about ownership of particular documents, because you wanted to really control version control of it. And so what it was trying to solve for, of course, it would get messy all the time, but what it was trying to solve for was, look, there's this new contract proposal template or whatever. Well, people are downloading it to their desktop, and then they're using that one for 2-3 months. Well, in the meantime, it's been updated by legal or something like that. Well, they don't know where to get it, or maybe it's on the Google Drive, and now there's 7 versions of it. And so they just grab the one from their desktop and they use it. Well, it's out of date. And so Seismic is trying to, it's one of many, many tools that try to control for this, because it gives ownership to individual versions of each document. And it's very, very specific. And one of the things we would have to say as consultants was, you need to internally with your team, and this could definitely be for AI too, is you have to come up with a system and process and rules or where that document can be grabbed for. And honestly, if anybody after they've been taught grabs the document from anywhere other than inside Seismic, meaning that it has to be the approved document because it's the only place anybody should ever be grabbing it from, then that's a slap on the wrist. That's a correction. That's something that needs to be changed immediately, either with that individual or several people in the company if there needs to be new training on that. Because it should only ever be whatever document is in there, and the owner of that document is responsible for making sure that it's always the most updated. And so Sarah and I and others were having a conversation about this, and I'm saying, this is what's going to have to happen for prompts. This is what's going to have to happen for a lot of parts of AI, because as these things, you get prompt drift and things we've talked about, yeah, it's going to be a real problem for evaluations, right, Beth, as you were talking about evaluations. And how do you keep that clean, and how do you scale that? It's going to be a big consideration for a lot of companies.
Yep.
I mean, I think with documents and different people downloading them and using them locally, I sometimes wonder whether that's mostly due to it being easier to do it that way than to do it the way we want it done. And so whether you need to actually, and I don't know how easy it is to enforce this so that nobody can ever download something and keep it for a couple of months or not update it or not, but it is, if there's not a system in place to A, make it easy for the end users to use it, but also B, make sure that we don't have multiple users, then you're always going to have that problem. So whether AI solves that or whether something else solves it, I don't know at this stage.
So I'm not sure if it was okay if I switch gears a little bit. I'm just curious because I want to go back to the high level, because we went kind of the data path, which is I agree with everybody's thoughts that didn't have anything to add. But I want to go back to the high level, assessing your org's readiness, because, obviously the first thing, and Jimmy made a good point, data is key. If you have crappy data, then there's very little AI can do with it. Right. So the next thing I was going to say is like, what else do we need to consider when looking at AI readiness of an organization? So basically my thought goes to first, the leadership and the people. So our theory at WSI is top down, bottom up. So we want to make sure we have adoption from both, because one's going to lead the strategy and pay for it, and one's going to be the executors, the ones that actually have to work with it, and their jobs are going to be mostly affected by it, their workflows, and they're going to be forced into using a technology that maybe they're not comfortable with. So our first assessment that we do, we have a four-part framework, and one of our commenters made a question about what kind of framework do you use. So ours is structured. The first one is going to be starting with strategy and leadership. So we do an interview with the leadership and getting an assessment of really where they are with AI. Basically, what is their attitude about AI and their willingness to embrace it. And the second group is going to be the bottom-up approach, which is the people and culture, understanding where they are. I mean, no offense to older people, but they're less likely to adopt technology. And if they just got email last year, then they're not really going to be ones that are going to be adopting AI really well. And then the next category is not related. The next category for AI readiness is looking at those clients and customers. Are those customers leaving them because they're going to AI? That's the elephant in the room. We need to assess that part. And the fourth one is more of the detailed oriented. We call it the functions and processes. So we go into everybody's role. So we analyze the marketing department, the sales department, supply chain, HR, accounting, and we analyze them and we say, what is your workflow on a day-to-day basis? What software tools are you using? What SaaS products that you would like to integrate? And quite frankly, those interviews yield the most use cases because people know where their bottlenecks are. People know what they want to have fixed, and they don't know AI can fix it. And then that's what we do. We go and they're like, well, AI can do that. And sometimes it's not AI. Sometimes it's just, Salesforce or HubSpot automations, right? But anyway, so not to go on a rabbit trail, but the AI readiness, that's the framework that we use since Anne actually asked the question. But I guess asking the group, is there something that I left out? I'm just curious. Is there something, a department that we need to analyze?
Can you, before we do that, Robert, because that was so valuable, can you just summarize the steps real quick again, just for us or for everybody else?
Yeah, sure. So stage one is Stage one is a leadership and strategy. So we're doing an hour interview with the C-suite. And we have a script, number of questions. Of course, we record the call and the interview and whatever. Then the next section is people and culture. It's the bottom-up approach, understanding the aptitude, attitude of the staff members. Usually, that's the head of HR interview or whatever. The third category is the end customer. So that's going to be the chief operating officer interview, understanding who exactly is responsible for handling the end customer experience, right? And the fourth category is functions and processes. We're interviewing the managers of each department. So that's the framework.
That's awesome.
Cool. I want to weave together both strategy and functions and processes. And a framework that you can use to approach that is called business capability mapping. And it's basically focusing on every system and process that your company uses to deliver value to the marketplace, and determining, at a fine level of detail, which ones of those are core competences in the company in achieving its long-term strategy, and which ones are not so important. Now, so what you're doing really is you're looking at every single function in the company, so from strategy at the C-suite level, that to marketing and sales, to production management, to product and service development, R&D, procurement and logistics, finance, legal, every single one of those. And you go through a process of listing each of this, both daily and then longer cadence routines that each of those functions goes through. You list them all out, and that becomes a beautiful map that you can then review in the context of which of these are accessible to an AI implementation and which are not. We all know now that customer support, customer relationship management, marketing and sales, that's really the front line right now of where AI is being implemented in most companies. But there are a lot of other opportunities in all those other functions. And identifying those is really a good strategic process internally, no matter what, whether you defer implementation of AI for now, or if you're going after it aggressively to be one of the leaders.
One thing that I think we're up to 15 now clients, and every single one that we believe that I've seen from a success perspective, from a business case, is the marrying of leadership and champions. What we're seeing is like the leadership is connected to the AI champions and using or creating champions and using that to distribute, or I don't know, execute on an AI strategy for the entire company. And that's what we've seen like time and time again of the businesses that we've worked with. So I think like those, from a readiness perspective, when you look at what Robert was talking about in terms of that list of what you're supposed to do. And, you know, when we do kind of our discovery is where is leadership into it, but also where are the people who are actually either actively campaigning or actively using and spreading. And the companies that we know aren't very successful is they don't have the champions, or people are just using it in a silo. And it was an interesting dichotomy when just listening to everybody today on that.
So, Carl, would you say that developing the champions or the change agents that's just the key component?
That would definitely be a key, because there's you can top down it all you want, but it's not going to be successful if just a bunch of people up top are telling everyone, hey, you got to use it this way, because they won't know all the different ways you could use it. But ideally, if you have a champion in your department, that's big, or develop that champion, that's huge, because that's sort of where you start pulling if you start getting more complicated, your AI councils in, right? And that's where you start talking about like all the, you know, operating principles, guidelines, and so on.
And so everything that we've talked about so far, do you all feel that it scales, or does the importance scale as well? So the larger the business, is there anything that's a key point or a key step that you would want to focus on, especially if your business is considered medium or large or anything like that? Is there anything you would want to highlight out of all of those steps?
I think there's
business
one.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, I think business culture becomes more important as the business gets larger and larger. Like you can do a lot with kind of interpersonal relationships in smaller businesses, but a larger, like, these are our core values and these are actually the way that we behave. Sometimes they're aligned, sometimes they're not, but it's more and more important in a larger business that your culture has a bottom-up trust, has a top-down, bottom-up alignment, I would say.
Yeah, and I would add to that.
What were you going to say, Carl?
Sorry, I was just going to say real quick, the one thing I would add to that, Beth, is that, you know, we see so much of siloing of really good information on large corporations. I can't tell you how many times as a consultant I've gone into a organization only to find that HR has this like truly amazing solution, and let's say finance doesn't know it exists in the same company. And you're like, did you know that HR was doing this thing? And they're like, no. It happens all the time in these larger organizations. I agree with you and Carl. And I was just going to say that I agree with all of it, which is that, you know, that cultural shift, yes, top down, but finding those champions, enabling those champions, allowing them to have the extra time it's going to take to vet some of these AI processes and fail repeatedly and be okay and support that as the top executives or the frontline managers to say, we expect this not to work the first, second, or 10th time, but we know you're moving towards some sort of greater solution, and we're giving you the clearance to go do that. Because that's a real thing. You know, people know that AI isn't necessarily going to work the first, second, or 10th time. And does somebody want to put their potential job or reputation on the line if the expectation is from management that this is going to fix things tomorrow, when in a very real way, it probably will not? I mean, we might be able to solve a small automation problem, but large scale, that's going to take time. So anyway, I didn't mean to jump on top of you, Carl. What were you going to say?
Oh, actually, you raised a good point, because we just finished from our company, our science fair, where everybody submitted in the science fair, similar to a hackathon for some companies, is a way for the company to get people to actually participate in places that you may not think. So whether it is legal, whether it is HR, whether it's client delivery. So, but I think the key there is some sort of activity to bring the people together and to showcase it, because, you know, legal could have a use case that HR could think, hey, that's an actually interesting use case, or client delivery could have a use case that marketing, like, hey, that's an awesome use case. But if you're going to start putting them into silos, that's really difficult, because they're just going to kind of do their own thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's really difficult right now for anybody any VP of tech or any, person who's in charge of delivery of AI tools. I'm just seeing how fragmented it could be out there, because there's all these tools and people want to try them, and they're still trying to get ChatGPT, OpenAI to apply. I know our company's trying to get Google, but they're like, Google's taking forever. So we're like, okay, what does ChatGPT, like enterprise ChatGPT look like? And it's like, but we still want to go with Google, but hurry up. Like it's all over the place right now, which is impacting readiness.
So I wanted to address Anne's question she asked, and because she kind of asked it directly to me. Oops, there you go.
I did that too. I'll stop. Go ahead.
All right, so
hands up.
Thanks for the engagement, Anne. We appreciate you so much. If you wanted to do a lighter version of that assessment, how would you prioritize? Well, the first thing, the framework is designed because it's all or nothing. But if you're looking for a quick and dirty, my first suggestion is going to the organization, small business, medium-sized business, and give a quick win. So they're going to come to you with, I had this problem, and you're going to serve as a consultant. So I guess my first, and this has happened to me quite often, I want this data done this way, and I can't figure out a way to do it because the POS system doesn't talk to the CRM system, and blah, blah, blah. And so they're going to have problems that are not easy. They're going to have problems that they would like fixed, and they haven't been able to. That AI could jump in and do so. Maybe it's not as AI, maybe it's just integrations and Zapier and Make, whatnot. But the most important first conversation has to be with leadership. So you have to get their adoption first. So if you're going to make a lighter version of it, have a nice conversation with that business owner. And then what problems are you facing? So you first make sure that you're okay using AI and understand the implications with the labor force as well as their end customers. But then search for that quick win. We call it at WSI, we call it the Trojan horse effect. So you basically have you go into the organization, you're embedded, and you do a solution that works, and there's a big win there, 5x, 10x, whatever that workflow is. And they're like, wow, I want you to do it over here too, and over here. And that's kind of our theory. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of wrap up with a question for everybody. TLDR, broad strokes, top 3 things that you would do to prep for AI. Go.
Like an organization would prep for AI? Like, what do you mean?
You could either take it from the consultant coming in doing discovery, or you would do it from or the point of view of from internally for an organization. But what's your top 3?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's going to be clean up your house, right? That's the data part of it. Just if nothing else, to Andy's point, to make sure you understand what you have access to. I would say that also takes into data governance and naming organizations and conventions that you should have in it. Another thing I would say, what we say all the time, is just to simply start using the tools, identify those champions, and give them the space and the runway to use the tools, and be okay with failing, because that will ultimately lead to success. And third, not a pitch to me. I mean, I know I do consulting, but sort of for a lot of us, I mean, Robert, Carl, and everybody else on this panel that does consulting, talk to people who are working in your unique niche. I mean, I work in sales. Carl works when he does, Robert with WSI, and everybody else who's dealing and talking to customers. Don't be afraid to go and talk to some consultants about AI and ask those hard questions, because it's going to be much better for somebody like Robert to come in and ask the tough questions against the company. He's going to get more insights and I think better results for that company than if they tried to do that internally, because there'll always be some other sort of flexor or whatever. So I'll stop there, but those are my 3.
I think that's the phrase I use for that is they often don't know what they don't know. And that's where having an external person come in and get them started is a good thing. So,
Andy?
I'm just going to keep it to 1. I think there's an opportunity to start the AI literacy process by putting prepackaged tools that leverage OpenAPI, ChatGPT, but have prepackaged prompts to do certain tasks. And one of the companies that does this is Writesonic. They have a long list of all these things you can just employ using the Writesonic subscription. And I know, Carl, you mentioned the other day that I think they have a new feature called Agent, which will do web scraping as well. So you can incorporate that. But it'll go right down to, writing emails, pick this thing out, and it gives you a guide on how to do that. If you put something like that in the hands of all of your employees, it makes it much more, palatable and easier than having them have to struggle through the process of learning how to do prompt formatting in a conversation with ChatGPT.
I love it.
I'm going to say map your processes. I said this like 4 shows ago or something, but and map them visually so that it's kind of an at a glance thing, right? So that you can communicate, this is how that's happening. And that's not even AI, right? That's business analyst stuff. But it creates a really clear spotlight on where pain points are that AI can help. And it's also like it's a, as Andy said, like it's like a playbook for your organization, what's happening. And who's
I'm going to say my 3 real quick, pretty simply. Data management, but I was going to say centralization of your data from all the different departments then is better utilized by an AI tool. So not only clean data, but centralize your data so that it's easily accessible. Number 2, education. Start educating your staff. Do workshops, do courses, encourage them to give them subscriptions to ChatGPT, whatever. And then the 3rd thing, I think Brian mentioned, bring it to every conversation. This is Ethan Molnick out of Wharton School of Business. Molick. He's brilliant. I love him and his wife. But the thing he said at the conference at Macon, he said, bring it to everything you do, bring it to it. You're making lunch, you're making dinner, you're doing a spreadsheet, you're doing analysis, you're doing a PowerPoint, whatever. Bring it to every conversation. Carl, what do you think?
Well, 3, you've touched on 1, education. 2, for me, is assessment of current AI activities. What are you doing? And then 3, actually write down your from each department, what are the processes to accomplish things? And that one to me was the big one, because then you can see all the ways you can implement what Rachel will call her hierarchy of AI tasks, all the good tasks. And that's the easiest one to get in and start developing efficiencies for your business.
And Jimmy, you asked, but you want to bring us home? You got any?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of each of yours. Number 1, documentation, internal information, document all those processes, like Beth said. Clean up your data, like you said, clean up your data. But I think the number 1 thing that you got to do before any project is map out your goals. What do you want to get out of it? And just start there as a step 1. And then everything else should fall in place.
All right.
And
I love it. I think we solved it, guys. We did it.
I gotta go.
Yeah. Did you have more, Aaron? I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
Yep. So when I go in, I'm only doing marketing stuff, so I don't do ops or anything like that. So when I go in with a client that needs help in using AI, it's usually it's the first thing is, let's get you a couple of accounts, whether it's ChatGPT or Midjourney set up, and let's get you a staff member like a champion so that they can start practicing and learning those things. And then I'll try and work with them to figure out what they need in the prompts and that sort of stuff, and we document that so that they've got systems to follow. And then there's just usually an ongoing process of reviewing what's going, providing feedback to help improve it. So they're probably the 2 or the 3 main things I would do on the marketing side of things.
Cool.
Excellent. My apologies, Aaron. Aaron, I didn't mean to cut you off there. All right. Well, fantastic. Well, listen, guys, that takes us for a little over, but that's okay. I think there was a lot of really, really good information in this show. Hopefully that helps you out if you're just thinking about AI and where to start it. You've got some really good ideas now from all the amazing people on this show. So with that, we will see you guys tomorrow. We will be back. And until then, bye, guys.
Happy Wednesday.
Yeah.